Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. We are in part 3 of my TEDx story/journey. If you have missed the last couple of episodes, I'm going to give you a quick recap here, but I do recommend you pause, you go back. I shared 2 episodes ago in the very first episode of the series that I have landed a TEDx talk. This has been a dream for me for many, many, many years. And episode 1 of the series was all about how I had this idea back in 2021, but would squash it. And overachievers do this a lot. We get inspired by a big dream and a big goal, and then we immediately talk about how it probably won't happen and how we probably won't get there. And so because we have that mindset, a lot of times overachievers won't even try. We won't try for the big dream or big goal because we talk ourselves out of it. So I share that all in episode 1 of the series. I recommend you go and listen to that because I spent quite a few years talking myself out of even trying. Last week's episode, which is episode 2, was making the decision, having the actual thing decided, like this is the year I'm going to reach my goal weight, or this is the year I'm going to prioritize my health. This is the year I want to give a TEDx talk, is very exciting. But the thing that actually creates a result is not the excitement and motivation you get at the exclamation of a goal. It's actually in the tedious, boring, consistent work that actually has no excitement at all. My intention with that episode was really to highlight that overachievers make the mistake of believing something is going wrong when we don't feel excited about something. And then we start looking for novelty and excitement and motivation. And that's the real reason we never get consistent. So you can go and listen to that podcast episode. It was really an important signal for me because I had this really huge dream that I was so excited about. But when it came down to doing the nitty gritty, tedious, effortful work, I found myself procrastinating a lot. And I had to catch that and really turn it around to even be here talking about this. This week's episode is, in my opinion, the most important part of any journey. And that was handling rejection, disappointment, and failure. Part of the reason that this is hard for overachievers is we have a particularly hard time with rejection, failure, and disappointment. And this is simply because in our younger years in school and as we were growing up, we learned that our value and self-worth were attached to how productive we were. Because I love using kid examples, I just want to use a quick kid example to really highlight this point. If your kid tries out for the soccer team, and let's say they don't make the team, it's true, they failed at the goal, but are they inherently a failure? I would say if you're a mom listening to this, you know without a shadow of a doubt that of course they're not. Yet a lot of times we have a hard time separating the two. We make ourselves a failure. I'm saying that this is one of the most important episodes of this series because at the very start of the entire TEDx process, I had to make an agreement with myself, which is I'm going to shoot all the shots. I'm going to go big. I'm going to apply to all the places because the idea that I have matters enough for me to do that. And also, it may not happen on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth attempt. And so when I experience, not if I experience, it was when I experience a rejection or a failure or a disappointment, I'm going to treat myself so well that I don't have to be afraid of a rejection anymore. Now, this is easier said than done. I remember for the first multiple applications that I put out for this TEDx talk, I would get a rejection in my email. And my very first thought, again, I'm talking about my most reflexive, primitive brain thoughts. This is coming from my own personal stress archetypes. My immediate thought was, see, this is probably not for you. That was the very first thought. This is me saying this as a mindset coach who knows and catches these patterns all day, all the time. My very first thought every time I would get a rejection was, see, this is probably not happening. See, this is not for you. And I'm sharing this part because just knowing that you're going to experience rejection or failure or disappointment as an intellectual exercise is not the same thing as actually viscerally experiencing rejection and failure in real time. The first piece was the logical part, me saying to myself, listen, when we experience failure, we're going to be really kind to ourselves. That was the logical part. That was the plan. But in the moment when you actually experience the rejection or the failure, your body has an automatic response. And this is not always logical. The way that your body responds, this is your stress response, it's driven by the decades of training that you've given your body. For many, many decades, I have held myself to a really high standard, and anything other than a gold star or A+ got self-criticism. It wasn't surprising that when I experienced the very normal rejections and the many disappointments on the journey over this past year, it was so important that when it happened, I was expecting it. It didn't catch me off guard, and I didn't let that primitive reaction, the see, I knew you were going to fail, I didn't let that stay my internal soundtrack. And this is the power of really knowing your stress archetype. I know that when I fail at something, my very first thought is, see, I knew you couldn't do it. But now that I've caught that as one of my patterns, I don't believe my initial thoughts anymore. Knowing your stress archetype and being able to catch it in real time really helps mitigate how you respond to the rejection, the disappointment, or the failure quickly. One of the most important skill sets that I learned in my 60-pound weight loss journey that I talk about on this podcast a lot is your ability to get back on track like you never left off without drama requires a personal relationship with yourself and the ability to regulate your feelings in real time. So what this looks like is when you do experience a sideways moment where you get the rejection, the fail, the disappointment, and it feels crushing, to remember that that feeling is normal. That feeling, number one, is an emotion that you know how to handle because you've handled it before, and it's not too much for you. Usually, the reason that rejection or disappointment or failure has a sting to it is because you simply care about the goal. And so that is what started to become my mantra this past year. As the rejections would come in and all of the disappointments would come in, one of the mantras that I had with myself was when I would experience the crushing rejection or the feeling of disappointment, was to really hold myself with a little bit of regard. I had to talk to myself the way that I would talk to a 4-year-old child. I had to actually go through those motions of this is just you feeling really disappointed, and your disappointment makes a lot of sense. You really wanted this. You really care about this. Your sadness, disappointment, that feeling that you're having, you make a lot of sense. I think a lot of times overachievers are very used to just jumping right into toxic positivity or just cheerleading themselves out of an emotion. And yes, having positive thoughts, of course, is very important, but not at the cost of ignoring this very, very normal part of the process. But the faster that I got at catching that feeling, validating how normal it was that I felt that way, and using that rejection as an opportunity to learn, that was when I started to make real headway. A lot of times when we experience a rejection or disappointment, we miss out on the opportunity that is sitting right there. There's a reason that the application got rejected. There's a reason that you experienced the fail. And I think for many, many years, I used to lose the opportunity that was sitting in front of me, which is learning from the rejection. That is what has made such a big difference, absolutely with health and weight loss, and for sure with TEDx. I had to really look at my application objectively through the eyes of the reader. Why might they have rejected this application? Why might they have said that this is not a good fit for their stage? Why might they have said this is not up to where it needs to be? And being able to answer those questions, not from a place of shame or blame or judgment, but from a place of true objective curiosity, is what pushed my talk to the best that it could be. And I know the mistake I used to make was I would either get to a defensive or entitled place, or I was so full of that negative self-talk that I wasn't able to do this part of the process. So this episode is an episode that really talks about the value of learning from your rejection, learning from the disappointment and the failure. And the only way to really learn, you can't learn if you're in shame spirals or embarrassed or feeling terrible about yourself. It's near impossible to learn because the part of your brain that does the learning is literally offline. I want to really encourage, if you have ever experienced a rejection or a failure, you likely will if you have big dreams, to get really, really good at catching that feeling in real time, treating yourself well, and then doing the work of learning from the fail. This is the one skill. This is, if I could think of all of the $1 million skills that it takes to live the dream life you want, to me, this is one of the top $1 million skills that I think is missing for overachievers. We're so used to winning and getting A's and A pluses and gold stars that we have gotten really, really bad at failing. And I want to invite all of you listening to maybe turn that around. Rather than avoiding failure and avoiding rejection and avoiding circumstances that would require you to fail, what if instead you dared yourself to fail better? What if you dared yourself to get really good at rejection, really good at disappointment, really, really good at facing that failure head on so that you could live a bigger life in maybe the way that you're wanting? I will say one caveat here is that it sounds easier than it is. And this is, again, for me, the value of coaching. Having peers, coaches, and mentors alongside me with this journey when I was in my lowest low, when I was feeling the weight of a rejection or disappointment, when I wanted to throw in the towel, they would reflect back to me and remind me that there is capability here. And my only job, if I choose it, is to learn from the rejection and decide to go again. I think this is why it is essential and so important that you surround yourself with friends, community, peers, and get yourself into coaching circles where you can be reflected back in the same way. Because if you have a big dream, you are 100% going to fail. There is no way around that. And remember, it can't just be an intellectual exercise. It happens when you put yourself in the ring. I'm so glad that you are here alongside me as I'm sharing this 4-part series. Next week is my final episode of the series, and then I'm giving the TEDx talk. It is happening in Philadelphia on August 29th, and I cannot wait to keep sharing more with you. I will say this again and again, but my weight loss and health journey prepared me for this journey. And it seems like these are two completely unrelated goals, but the lesson I've learned over this past year is achieving a goal is really not that unique. You actually just need a set of skills and tools to achieve the goal, and then you can start applying that skill set and your toolbox to the next goal. The $1 million skills I learned in losing over 60 pounds as a busy woman doctor with young kids and a busy life has very, very much been applicable in this journey. And I'm so grateful to the first part of the journey, which has led me to this part. I'll see you guys all next week in the next episode. And if you have not yet taken the stress quiz, head over to burnstressloseweight.com/stress. Answer a few questions. It will take a few minutes, but it will help you uncover your unique stress archetype. That is your primitive automatic reaction. And just knowing what your stress archetype is will help you get power back. Make sure you check your email inbox because that's where I will send your results, plus additional tools to help you walk through your stress archetype with a lot more power. I'll see you back next week, my friends. Bye.